All right, I think we can slowly go into it,
yeah.
I'd say. Yeah. So, hey everyone, welcome back to the second workshop with me and Federico. The workshop is essentially a way for us to talk with you guys, to answer your questions, and to give some ideas on how you can tackle the FP20 challenge for this month, which is regarding the chain supply and the sales for North America. For today, mainly what we're going to be focusing on are two things. We're going to be continue talking about the report and the sample data that we already have provided for the challenge. We're going to talk about some of the tips and tricks on how to use the visuals, how to get more from them, and so forth. But this time, we actually decided to go a little bit of a different approach. So instead of me sitting here and, being just a representative of ZoomCharts and telling you, hey guys, these visuals are great, how to do things and everything, I wanted to give the word to Federico. And the reason for this is because just to showcase that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to learn everything from A to Z to make efficient reports. Federico has started to learn about ZoomCharts approximately probably about the same time as you guys started to. So what you can get from this is how to create these from a perspective of a new user, not the one who's been doing this for a couple of years now, right? So, and that's one of the main things. I wanted to give a possibility for Federico to showcase how to build great reports with just starting off with ZoomCharts. And that is what we're going to do. So Federico is going to talk about his report. He's going to showcase you what he's done, how he has created it, and so forth. And then we're going to continue on talking about a few other aspects of what tips and tricks can we also recommend you whilst building the reports, what to keep in mind, what to think about when designing these things, and so forth. And of course, at the very end and throughout the session, of course, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to just straight away ask them. The only rule for that is please try to post the questions in the Q&A section of the chat. So it's just a little bit easier for us to go through them and make sure that we don't miss any. Because if it's a part of the chat, it's kind of simple to kind of run through it. But if it's in the Q&A, it's a lot easier for us to go through them and make sure that we answer all of them. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. I'll call it a show because I think we're pretty entertaining.
We are.
We are, definitely. So yeah, without further ado, Federico, you can take the floor, start sharing the screen, and show everybody what you've done.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Ibis, and let me hopefully show my screen properly this time.
There we go.
Okay, that is my first page. It's not fully finished yet, but we are close to that. For me, a challenge is a process. It's a process where I prepare my data model. I make sure everything is okay in my tables. And I start thinking about, okay, what I want to show. Okay, so my normal take is the first page to be an overview. If we have sale, cost, quantity, and profit, I want to see an overview over different dimensions. So I start with this card over there, and this card is just a KPI card. Then I have another element that is this one, and then have another element that is a bar chart. When you come out with the final solution to the card, you just only copy and paste and adapt the measure. You look at here, I go sales, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4 measures. And I go quantity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, one more because I probably was trying for something. But all of them have almost the same amount of measures because then I copy and paste. If we are quantity and sales as your quantity, you will see that the same formula I just changed quantity for sales. So when you have your first card built and you are happy, you just copy and paste with the formulas. Another little trick. I go year over year that you might not to do it manually and you might have in your head. Sometimes I forget about it, and it is a quick measure. Okay, guys, there is quite a lot of pre-made calculation for you to use where you don't have to drive yourself crazy. That is the second trick. Then I did say, okay, I got these KPI cards. They show sale, cost, quantity, and profit. I go filter. That is filtering everything perfectly. I can actually see the cost in 3 different charts, or quantity, or profit. So I'm giving you more than one view with a simple filter slicer here and a jet slicer here. This card is important because it tells you last year's sales. But in 2014, there cannot be nothing before. So when you click on it, there is this little trick that if there is nothing, print me no data found. And if you look at here, is there. And the formula is nothing complicated. If selected value equal 2014, give me no data found. Otherwise, give me last year. They are uncomplicated stuff that anyone, believe me, can do, and that will work really, really good and provide plenty of information for your end user to see. This one, and this one, the ZoomChart, I love what I can do with that one because everything is playing around. I want you to see the magnitude of the filtering because it's brilliant. Everything is moving. It takes filtering to a new level. Again, there is multiple filtering, and here we have a subcategory. I'm not 100% sure about it, still in the process of building the report. So I don't know if I'm going to leave this here or I will change it. But as you can see, if we look at profit, everything what is below 0 has been conditionally formatted. Okay? If you need to know or you want to know how, please go to Evis Asking. I actually work it out, but I think it was more luck than anything else. Okay, basically, you have to enable conditional formatting. Lower color is the red, opacity 100, upper color is the blue. This is the trick. Normally, you're going to see this series, go to constant value, put 0 there, okay, and it will work. Anyway, please ask Avi, he will explain better than me. But everything basically is actually conditional formatting. And I think that is quite nice to be able to say, oh, red, that is not good, or is good. So that is so far what I have been able to build. Still a lot to do. Another page that is called geography analysis that I haven't actually think about yet, but everything is working very well. Another thing, if you click, this is a parameter field, guys, a parameter field. You just create it there, and you add measures in there. Okay, and then you can create a slicer, and the measure, you click in there, you see the measure is metric, is there. And you can switch. It's kind of not similar to calculation group, but it might make the same purpose. Okay, so nothing special, a good color palette, 4 KPI card, a bar chart, column chart, and a fantastic donut. I love the donut. I love that facility of filtering the information. That's it. That is how far I have progressed. Still quite a few days to go. So I'm sure by the end of the time, it will be fully ready. Don't worry, guys, I cannot win, so I'm just doing it for the love of art. I think copies an idea from here. Remember, quick measure for something semi-complicated. Field parameter give you another dimension. And let's say you're playing with man, don't play with man in the slicer, play with year. Okay, that's for me. Avis, I go back to you now.
All right, let me just quickly take over. Somehow have to fill the air.
Okay, suddenly there are a lot of people. You see, I start presenting, and a lot of people came in. They were hidden. Like they were scaring me. No, we are not coming to see you, Federico. That's terrible.
Yeah, they're waiting for the right moment.
Yeah. Oh, Federico is gone now.
Quickly.
Hi, Ilsa.
All right, let me just quickly share my primary screen. Yeah, few things to also remember. I also wrote in the chat, but something to remember about if you are, for example, like Federico mentioned, these are field parameters, right? This is the same report as Federico was using. If you are using field parameters, one thing to remember, and this is, remember, it was a little bit confusing the very first time I started to use the field parameters. You cannot reference within the field parameters just regular value columns. Those will not work properly. So what you have to do is essentially create measures for them. So you can see, for example, in the original table, we had the fact sales. So you can see we have sales right here, we have profit right here, we have costs and so forth, right? Cost is actually, I think Federico calculated for himself.
I added, yeah.
Anyway. We have profit, quantity, and sales. So if I would have used these columns, it would not be as dynamic because it essentially doesn't return the value itself. So what you would need to do is similar to what already Federico did here. You need to create separate measures for them. And you can see the measure is nothing super complex. It's a very basic calculation of just sum for the cost, sum for the profit, sum for the quantity. And then use those measures within the field parameters. Now, once you create a parameter, we can quickly go through that as well. So once you have the parameter, you're going to have another table created for you. And the table itself is basically a relatively simple measure once you understand what's in it. At the very first time when you see it, it's probably going to be like, yeah, sure, it seems super easy, right? Why didn't I think of it? No, trust me, it's not that complex. It's just trying to understand what's happening here. But essentially what happens here is the field parameter returns you a column, which allows you to create a slicer. Based on the selection of the slicer, it allows you to choose one of the values to be showcased. So for example, if I click on sales, you can see, like Federico already showed, it switches in all the visuals. I switch to quantity, I switch to costs, I switch to profit. So it's very simple and very efficient. This is another amazing way on how you can create, let's say, more information within a singular workspace. Because one of the things you have to remember when building the report, as a report developer, the most premium resource that you actually have is the space within the canvas of the report. You can't magically add it. Sure, I could say that, yeah, theoretically, I could go to the page settings and say that, okay, I want something custom. So suddenly now there's 1500 pixels times 2000 pixels. Sure, you could do that. But when you start to think about who's going to be using the report, those screen sizes are not normal, right? So you have to think about regular screen sizes, like, for example, 1080p, or Microsoft's default one is for 720p.
16:9, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to think about the way that these things are essentially getting created for your end users. So always think about that. And field parameters. Yeah, go ahead, Federico.
I know in the challenges there are a lot of very long reports with a lot of ink. Don't do that, guys. Give your white space. A report that you can look from the top to the bottom and you can see all the information at once. You don't need to scroll. Don't follow that idea. People are confused on that, and a lot of people is following what they see and falling on the same mistake. At least specified by the client, the end user, report has to be of an horizontal base, 16.9, or the HD that is 118.920.
Yeah. So the reason why you usually see, for example, also this is one of the common mistakes caused by just the way that things are getting presented is, for example, when you see these long reports, it's probably because you saw a post on LinkedIn where somebody just wanted to have everything in a singular image. That doesn't mean that the report is built in the same manner. Usually you try to separate things into different pages. It's like Federico said, right? So first off, you create a page which is sort of like an overview of the global situation. And then you go into similar how with the data model, you go into different dimensions. You talk about geography, you talk about the product specifically, and that's where you can go into details. But don't necessarily create longer reports, because what I've seen from my experience is if you start to go with the height, for example, if I set it to something like 2000, and if I go with something like an actual size, okay, I adjust it. So for example, it seems like this. Sure, now everything kind of squirted because I have a background image in there. But essentially what would happen here is if the user doesn't notice that there's a scroll bar, his first interaction wouldn't be to scroll down to look for more information. He's looking at the page as is. So always just think about what is going to be the first point of entry and how you're going to present it to the user. What else? In the previous session, I showed you this report. And I actually noticed that I did a mistake here. And once I noticed it, I was like, well, this is going to prove that, we're all human. Even though I've been working with Power BI for multiple years now, I've been building reports for a couple of years now, it still doesn't mean that I'm always going to be making everything perfectly, right? And the small mistake that I made here is in this situation right here. So for example, if I go to profit, you can see here we have a small table for the bottom and the top average delivery time. And you can see by switching them, nothing really changes, right? Only the table, which is the effect that I wanted to have here. I don't want it to take or update anything else, just the table. But if I go and switch everything down to sales, and if I go to bottom 5, you can see that I've accidentally saved also the previous state for these visuals. So suddenly it stays on sales because that's one selected, but I'm showing different visuals. The reason for that, and this is one of the things that I recommend you to always take a look at once you're starting to play around with the bookmarks about these additional properties that you have for them. And you're going to see that, for example, for top 5, you can see I selected visuals instead of all visuals. For bottom 5, I've accidentally left it on all visuals. So the main difference here is selected visuals means that the bookmark that I save at a particular state is only going to be recognized by those visuals that I select at the moment of the saving of the bookmark. If I keep it on all visuals, even though I select, for example, only 3 visuals, every single visual in the report page is going to capture that particular state. So it's one of the things that, trust me, the amount of times when I've forgotten to switch between these and had to redo the bookmarks, it probably goes into hundreds, and it's not going to end anytime soon.
it take a little bit to actually apply bookmark properly. The mistake you're mentioning is, I think everybody has to go through it and to understand the 3 different versions of the bookmark. When you right click on it, it's not that easy. I try to be very simple in my approach. Mm-hmm. It's 1 step in and 1 step out, in the sense of, now is the view I want to, now is the normal view. And that's how I tackle a bookmark, or my logical thinking behind it.
Because I think when you start to play around with the bookmarks, the main thing is, I think I already mentioned this and also in the first workshop, is this is the main bookmark you have to learn. It's the most simple one, but it's the most important one. And that is the reset filter button. The main reason why you create this very simple yet efficient bookmark is because it allows your user to, for example, in situations where he starts to go down the rabbit hole, as I say, right? He just applies filters left and right from this section from here. Then I'm going to drill down into July. And then you're like, okay, but what have I actually selected here? How do I get back to the very beginning? You could go back with each individual visual and so forth, but having a reset is just one single click. It's that simple, and it's very powerful. So for all reports, I always recommend to have a reset filter way for the user to get back to the initial state, so they don't have to worry about getting lost in the report. You could, of course, enhance the situation by adding dynamic, for example, titles, either for the whole report or for certain charts to kind of give you an understanding of where it's going. But that's already, let's say, into a bit more into the advanced stages. So first off, create something that is relatively easy to comprehend, understand, and have very simple bookmarks to just switch between specific states. Once your user gets used to the Power BI and the way that the charts work and everything, that's when you can slowly start to transition into more complex stuff. Because the last thing you want to do is create a report which is super technical, and it is the first Power BI report that they see. Because essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to give them a completely new view for the information, but they're going to have a lot of questions on how do I use it, what does this do, how to control this, and so forth. So start off with relatively simple reports. Let them start to understand the concept of what interactive reports are, what are these drill down reports and everything. So how do I cross filter, how do I cross filter from different charts, how can I apply slicers and these sort of things. And when you start to, let's say, educate them, it's going to be a lot easier for you to also provide more complex scenarios. So just play around, see how they feel about it.
It is important for us developers to understand that the report is not for me, it's not for us, for the end user. And that is massively important. You might decide more than not to create an information page where you have some information about how to use the report. Okay, because you cannot assume the people that is watching or seeing the report have the same knowledge, analytical knowledge that you have. Therefore, for them, it's kind of baby food. Okay, for you, you are more mature, you know more what you have to do, but sometimes you have to constrain yourself to put some very fancy chart because it might not be easy to understand for new people that are not familiar with that chart.
Exactly. So whether you create an informational pages, usually people call them, or detail pages, you can also create, for example, things like informational overlays, where you showcase them what type of interactions are possible. There's just a tremendous amount of possibilities that you can do with just the same bookmarks and shapes and images and these sort of things. You have to just play around with it and see what works for you. Because in a lot of scenarios, what you're going to notice, you actually have this also in Microsoft's sales report sample that they, I think, released in 2021 or something like that, their updated one. And they also have, for example, buttons which call out a separate shape, which has a chart within that. So it's a concept that you can go into as well. But the same as Federico said, you want to make sure that you slowly get into the more advanced stuff. You want to first provide an understanding for them on how to use the visuals. Like, for example, the same thing I did here. Let's say this is a completely different report, but similar data set, right? So what I did here is you can see I have different brands. And here in the map chart, I didn't want to take any more space from the map chart, so I don't have a legend anywhere here. But what I did is I have a table right next to it. So this is just a regular table. And within the table, I have the particular brand, I have the total sales, I have a comparison for the previous year so I can see if the sales are growing or getting down. And then I just created one particular column, which is just the color of it. And that's it. And you use the color as the color of the background of the cell. You just squeeze it a little bit tighter because that's a regular table at the end of it.
Yeah.
So always just think about how you don't necessarily have to have everything within a single chart. Trust me, when you're going to be working with Power BI, you're going to have to understand there's a lot of workarounds for everything. Some of the stuff that you're going to see people are doing, you're going to be like, how did you even come up with this? And it's the same for us when, for example, bookmarks first came into the play of Power BI. They were very basic. They were just pretty much bookmarks for specific states. Then somebody started to play around with different states of items, with selected visuals versus all visuals, with informational overlays, with these sort of things. And it kind of goes, from there. But at the very beginning, those were basically states where you filter out similar to how you had a slicer. Select a region, select a view, select something else, and it was switching everything. Now it has become a lot more fluid because the community itself teaches everybody else. And this is one thing that I highly recommend as well. it's not about just these challenges. You have the Power BI community, you have LinkedIn groups, you have Facebook groups where you can always ask for help from the other users. The only rule that usually applies there is be respectful for your and everybody else's time. So what that essentially means is do a little bit of research before you ask, right? Just check if this question hasn't been asked, hundreds of times before. These sort of things. But other than that, it's the same thing as I do. For example, when I get stuck, the fact that I've been working with Power BI for almost 6 years now doesn't change the fact that I still have questions from time to time, which I don't have the answers straight away. So I just ask the community. If somebody can help me, that's great. If not, maybe somebody can give me a different idea where I can go in a similar way, but get a little bit of different result. So don't be afraid to play around, to ask for help. And I think people are going to appreciate it a lot more if you do that investigative work rather than just say, for example, oh, no, that's not possible. Play around with it.
Yes, I play that. That's a little trick that I used to use, and sometimes I do. You are a newbie. We are new. I don't know. Please, I'm new into Power BI. Can you tell me? And they will reply to you better if you are something with a lot of years work. So don't be shy. As Avi says, we still have trouble in coming to a solution of fitting something that we try to do because it's not that simple. So Power BI doesn't stop because you have been 5 or 6 years or 7 years in the working with it. Still, you will find different difficulties, okay, that you need to learn how to overcome.
I mean, don't forget, Power BI gets updated every single month. So we can't follow every single new feature that's out there, right? So even some of the things that you come across now have been released, for example, a couple of months ago. It's just that you didn't have a necessity to tackle them straight away. This is why I love the community and why I have loved the content that's being posted on YouTube, on LinkedIn, just to keep myself updated. Okay, what's new, what I need to know about, what I need to try out when I have the time. But yeah.
Sometimes it's that I call it the 1 hour, the Friday happy hour. Yeah, Friday happy hour. That's how I used to call it. So every Friday, I spend an hour or two just doing things with Power BI, trying new ideas. Okay, I will put an empty button, okay, and a circle, and the button will calculate the circle. And then when you hover over the button, the text appears because you can provide text on hover. So the default is empty. On hover is the title, and it's like you are touching the circle, okay, and then the effect happens. So it's kind of a ghost button. You only see the circle, and when you hover over it, you can see the title, because hover state, you can enter in a different state. You enter the title. And I used to play hours and hours with that, trying to actually come out with new ideas. But the more I try to do, the more you realize there are a lot of people there that are 3 times ahead of you, and it's better for you sometimes to look at them and try to not copy. I hate copying. Try to connect with your own idea. Yes, that's the base. That's what they're doing. How you can bring it up to your level.
Exactly. Just think about your way on how you can provide it. Because even though, for example, me and Federico have a very similar approach here, right? So, for example, he has used the field parameters to switch between sales, costs, quantity, and so forth. What I did in my report is similar concept, but I'm using bookmarks for this.
Yeah.
Each of them has their own pros and cons. Each of one of them is, let's say, field parameters are definitely a lot faster. Because you add field parameters, you add a slicer, and you add the metric into the visual. With bookmarks, you have to create multiple visuals, you have to play around with the states, you have to remember to choose the correct bookmark settings for these things when you're saving and so forth. But think about what you're trying to achieve. If it's just the metric that you're switching, then field parameters, for example, are completely fine. If you also want to start to play around with colors, different visual types, and so forth, then you have to go, for example, for bookmarks. So it's always playing around with these ideas so you start to understand in your mind as well what are the limitations of this particular feature. What are the scenarios where I should be using this? What are the scenarios where I should be using that? And it's always about trying to figure out what suits best your approach, because like I said, right, we might create similar things at the very end, but the approaches that we take could be completely different. It's the same thing as in Power Query. The things, let's say, we could get result in like 10 different ways. They're all going to be correct. It's just those are 10 different ways on how we got here.
You are going to be doing courses and listening to people that have a lot of experience, more than we have, and they have their best practices, but their best practices, not your best practices. You have to take a little bit from every one of them, and the one that you really like and make it yours, and then you create your own methodology, your own best practices. You don't have to be equal to the other person. That is his way of doing his work. You have to create your own methodology, your own way to do your thing. And I think it's very important because there is a lot of information. You need to actually pick what is actually you and how do you adapt it to your methodology.
Exactly. There's no one right way on how to do things. Everybody's going to tell you, this is the way you should do it, or that is the way you should do it. There's no one universal way that's going to fit everybody. It depends on the end user. And this is what Federico also mentioned, right? You're not developing the report for yourself. You're developing for somebody else who's going to be using on every single day or weekly basis or whatever it is. So you need to understand what he needs from this report. How is he going to interact with it? What information he's going to read first? What information he needs as a level of detail? And that's it. So that also changes the concept of the report. What else? So yeah, bookmarks, field parameters, these sort of things, always play around with them, see what works best. What else could we talk about? Different chart types. One of the things that I recommend you to do is, I think there's a new one, Power BI Visual Guide, maybe. You usually go for not videos, but images. This is a bit more outdated, but it's the idea that I'm just going to showcase here. So you can see there. Yeah, this is a little bit outdated, just a little bit. It even has our old icons. But the main idea why I'm showing this is, don't forget that there are visual types for specific scenarios. So when you're trying to do comparison, there are certain types of visuals you want to use. When you're going for analysis of part of whole, there are other types of visuals and so forth. This also helps users, especially developers, in the very beginning, just to understand, okay, they want this, but how do I visualize it? What chart do I use? And so forth. So these little guides can help you just to navigate you towards the right direction. So yeah, these ones, usually called visual guides or these sort of things. Go ahead, Federico.
And still, when you are new to the game, it still will take some time for you to understand what they mean by comparison, part to whole, time intelligent. And I'm quite guilty of, like everybody, I think, I just put chart on the Canva because they look okay. They probably were not the appropriate report, the appropriate chart, but I just put it there because look okay. So if that happened to you, welcome to my gang. I did make the same mistake until there is a point you understand that there are certain visuals for certain calculation or for the information to want to show. And then you have to become more knowledgeable about what I am presenting. Is time intelligent? Is time sales over time? I use a line chart and so on.
Exactly. Just go with what makes the most sense with the current data, right? And at the end of the day, if you're building it for somebody else, just double check with them. Showcase them what you build and ask, does this make sense? Can you read the information, or should I kind of showcase it differently? I don't remember if I told you guys this the last time, but I've told this many times before. The biggest, let's say, mistake that I ever made when building the reports was actually for one of our internal reports. So what I did is, when we started off with Power BI, of course, we started to adapt it also in the company, right? So we're recreating all the reports within Power BI so we can learn more, and so we're getting more efficient with it. And what I did is, well, one of my tasks was to recreate a sales report for the sales team, which was originally coming from the CRM system. So I'm basically at first just trying to replicate what they already had. That was the version 1, right? Then we made the improvements. But what I did there is I didn't pay attention to the colors as much as I needed to. And what I did there is essentially they were used to having each individual product in a specific color. I didn't know that. They didn't tell me that. So I just went with random colors. What colors I had in the palette, I separated them. Looks good. We can go with this. So I published a report. It had everything that the manager asked me to have in there. But after like a week, I started to do the analysis on the report because you can check how many users are viewing it and what's the usage of the report. And I'm looking at the usage and I realized that there's 2 people from like a 20 people team using the report, and not even daily, but on like weekly basis. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of curious. What did I do wrong? Because it has all the information you asked me to have. So I had a call with them. I said in separate time, I said, hey, I just need to understand what you're missing here, right? Because that was the goal, to create a report which is efficient for you. And the thing that they said is, well, you have the products in different colors than we're used to. So we had to spend a lot of time figuring out which product is which. And I'm like, you do realize that the change takes me like, I don't know, 2 minutes to fix? So I fixed the colors, and now the report is being used. It might be even that simple. This is why you double check with the end user if everything is understandable and if they need any more changes. Because they're going to be using it every day, not you.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that, the preparation to create a report or the information you're going to take for the end user or the recommendation, the colors, the font, the chart they like, the chart they don't like, that has to be applied to the canvas because that is what they understand. Look at how silly thing, just different colors. The report is providing you with the right information analytically, but people don't watch it just because it has the wrong color.
Exactly.
So we need to be very much aware of what they actually want and how they want it. And in the gathering process, that's the moment we start gathering all the information. So asking questions is very important.
Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is, don't think that building a report is always going to be a straightforward process. If you get the report on the first try, I envy you. I truly envy you, because that usually isn't the case. You usually go back and forth with the customer, because think about it like this, right? When you're building a report for a new customer, or if you're just bringing Power BI into the company, they don't know what features Power BI has. You need to present them to them. You need to tell them about the capabilities, what are the possibilities, and so forth. Whilst talking about different chart types, one of the things that I also recommend is to, like I said, think about different chart types and how you can display it. Because what usually people do is, as soon as you hear the word categories, you go with something like this, like a simple column chart, right? But based on the narrative that you're trying to tell, it might be useful that you actually showcase a waterfall chart. So what's the difference between these two? With a combo chart, you're just focusing on specific category values. If you're going with a waterfall, that means that you're focusing not only on the actual value for each of the product, but you're actually also interested in the very total at the end. It's quite a simple thing, but visually, this makes a lot more sense for some people. For some people, it's going to be like, but I don't really need that. I want to focus on these 3 things. Sure, switch it to column chart. It's not that difficult. But you have to give the user an ability to think in different directions. Like, for example, if I click on office supplies, I can see, okay, so these are the actual product types that we're selling, and this is how the total is getting created. We can see who are the biggest contributors, who are the smallest contributors, and so forth. If we go to profit basis, let's say we go to just subcategories, just so we have a smaller granularity, and I go with profit. Same thing. It shows me who are the biggest contributors to my profit and who are the biggest takers from my profit. And I can see that tables, I should really stop selling tables unless there's a specific reason why I'm selling tables at a loss. These things might happen because every single company usually have also these products which aren't necessarily the most profitable, but there might be other reasons why they're selling this. Either it's just to keep themselves in the market, or that's the original association, or whatever it might be. These things might happen. But this shows you a different view, because I could, like I said, right, I could handle this with just a regular column chart. It's the same information, but it's a completely different story. So think about it like this. What else? I think we covered it in the previous session, but I can quickly show it here as well. So for example, the combo bar, not the combo bar, sorry, the combo chart. So the combo chart is meant for category information. So I'm going to go for a category as a product category and a subcategory. As for the values, I'm going to go for the sales and I'm going to go for the profit. So by default, you're going to get 2 columns, which essentially creates a clustered column chart. I could play around with the padding as well, of course, and say column padding, I want the clusters to be more segregated, so to split them more apart, to make them more noticeable, things like that. I can even increase the gaps between here, or if I don't want to, I put them on 0 to make them as close as possible. So you can play around with the visual looks of it. But the thing that I wanted to do here is when we're talking about sales and profit, I couldn't really use, let's say, a stack, right? I think you can agree with me. Federico, you can probably agree with me as well, right? Stacking profit on sales makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So having a clustered one would be like, okay, that's one way on how you can look at it. But you actually saw it in the previous page as well. What you can do is I can say that these are actually going to be stacked. I'm switching the stacking mode under stack settings to 0 based. Now they're starting all from 0 point, but you can't really tell it. So if it's the first time seeing the chart, you're not going to be able to tell me if this is a normal stack or a 0 based stack unless you hover over and start to look at the values. But when it comes to intuitiveness, this is definitely not intuitive. So you can play around with the settings far, let's say, go even deeper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the yellow bar itself, and I'm going to say that this is actually going to be like maybe 10%, even too high. Let's say 5. There we go. So that's going to be my sales. And what I'm actually doing here is, this usually has many names, whether it's a bullet chart, whether it's a lollipop chart, but I'm going to add this. Then I'm going to transition the second column to be actually a line. The line itself is something I don't want to have because it kind of interferes with the overall feeling I want to have there. So I'm going to say that the outline width is 0. Well, now you look at it like, yeah, cool. Now it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever because there's just a small little bar there. But what I'm trying to do here is to go ahead and enable markers. So for example, I'm going to enable, let's go for circle. And we can actually make this even more narrow, put it at something like 2. So this allows me to basically create a bullet chart, a lollipop. There's different names usually called for similar charts. So if I go here, it actually shows me the kind of sales versus the profit. So where does the profit stand on the whole sales bar? And it's the same chart as you, for example, see here. These are the same settings, the same approach, not the settings, I would say, just different configuration option itself. So you can make things like these. You can make the charts that are called dumbbell charts, lollipop charts, bullet charts. There's like hundreds of different variations. And this is one of the things that I usually recommend everybody to do. When you see a chart just with the definition of it, it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that it can do. There's usually a lot more a chart can do. You just have to explore it. Like, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. Here we go.
I like that. I didn't know you can do that. I'm just learning about the ZoomChart the same way that the participants. And I didn't know that one, and I like it because I can see the possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see now, I can see the lollipop, I can see the dumbbell, I can see the bullet chart, the lipstick chart, I can see all of them, but because you open the imagination to me by showing me these examples. So brilliant.
Now let me break your brains a little bit more than even. Let's go ahead and create a new one. So this was a feature that we actually developed for a customer, but it has a lot more use cases in it. So just to give a background on the use case, right? So the customer was a call center. And for call center, you usually have a KPI, which is the average talk time. So basically, so they can understand how long does it take us to close a ticket. And what we did for them is, let's say I'm going to go for sales. I'm going to go for something like average sales, just so the values are, yeah, that's not going to really help me.
It goes down, yeah.
Let's go for something smaller than, let's say, count. What's the count? Okay. The numbers are not going to make sense right now, guys. It's just the idea that I want to play around. Profit again too high. I can go for maybe just regular quantity. Okay, yeah, this one works a little bit better. And then let's go for profit, but the average maybe? Nope. Max. Okay, 3 different colors.
That's okay, yeah.
So what we were willing to do for them and what we provided to them is under the settings, you're going to notice that we not only allow you to play around with the stack, but also with the cluster. And what we allow them to do here is to say that, for example, one of the columns is actually going to be the background or the column that's on top of everything. Okay. And what they were doing with this is they were essentially using one series to showcase the average talk time across different groups. So that was the team's middle performance. And then they were using columns within that bar to showcase where they stand against the team average. Like I said, this is the thing about not only native visuals, but also custom visuals. They have a lot of different options. You just have to play around with them. Not everything is going to be laid out on a plate. As much as everybody would try it, there's just too many settings to do that.
Yeah, that is the thing that you have to spend some time playing around. But that will be for me the perfect happy hour on Friday, playing around.
Yeah. Nobody's messing around with you, right? You just spend your time, play around with the charts, see what you can do. Because trust me, I think me and Federico, the amount of silly things that we have developed over the time is just ridiculous. But because of those silly things, we learned something new about the capabilities of bookmarks, buttons, and everything. Just because we play around with it, like, okay, that looks silly, but that gave me an idea of what I could use for something else.
Correct.
But yeah, play around. If you have any questions, feel free to just send us your questions. I'm going to post also the webinars at ZoomCharts.com. If you have any questions regarding the visual setup or anything, let us know about it. We're going to get back to you. You can tag us in the social media posts or whatever. Just reach out to us. You know, we're not going to bite. That's what I'm trying to say.
There is a question.
Yeah.
Elvis, can you see the question from Elvis?
Yeah, I can see it. I'm going to quickly also broadcast it. So how do you choose the optimal canvas size? Do you research or prediction on what is the most likely device that's going to be used to view the report? So there are a few ways on how you can go about this. One of them is, of course, you can do the research. So you ask the company employees, what is the device that you're using? What screen size do you use? And so forth. So you can get a full list of the devices and then do some data analysis and basically understand what is the average screen size, so you can adapt to it. The other thing is you can't really go wrong with using the 2 most common screen sizes or aspect ratios that are there. That is 16:9, which Power BI is using already by default. The only thing that I recommend with the default canvas size of Power BI is make it a little bit bigger, because by default, you essentially have 720p. So you have 720 pixels wide, and you have 1,280 pixels height. Sorry, around. I get them mixed up sometimes. But what is nowadays one of the most common screen sizes is if you go for something like 1080 times 1920.
That's my size.
Exactly.
And at least the client specifies otherwise, or your company or the company you work with, Elvis, say otherwise. I think that is a very safe size. I can tell you of good hand that the default setting in the camera will be soon changed to the 1920 1080. And it's happening. I hope they reply to your question.
If not, let us know. We'll clarify. All right. Guys, what are questions? Come on. I see little to no activity in the questions. Are we really that good, or are we really that boring? Inza, you mentioned that you checked out some of the samples. You played around with the data set. anything that you wanted to ask, anything that caught your eye maybe during the webinar that you want to learn about. Anybody else? Come on, guys. Let's keep it back and forth, right? It's a lot more interesting when there's a dialogue rather than a monologue. That's why I have Federico, because otherwise I would be, just here alone by myself.
No, it's a very big compliment. It's about your report, but I want you to also look at not the simplicity of the creation, but the number of colors he used. There are not many different colors. It's quite not monochromatic because you have to go with the accent color that is the red and the green from the arrows.
Yeah.
But it's simple. I want you to actually think when you're creating a report, there are not that many colors. The only difference in color is the table column bar that indicate what product he's referring to in the donut chart. Apart from that, it's very, very subtle and simple. And exactly. That we sometimes need to actually understand that less is more. You want to have a good color palette, monochromatic with the couple of different shades for accent color, the red and the green, or something for specifying the product or the region or the cities or whatever you want to make sure people get firsthand. But I think it's that constant of simplicity and an excellent color palette that made the report so beautiful. Apart from that, it's just bookmark some major and some arrows. It's not the complication on the DAX, what we're talking about. But when you are able to put together a good analysis and a good looking aesthetic report, you have a winner in your hand.
Like Federico said, sometimes less is more. You don't necessarily have to make things, shiny and pop up. Sure, it might catch the most attention from the users just because, there's interesting colors and so forth. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the most actionable report that you're going to see there. Some of the most actionable reports are relatively simple and they have little to no color whatsoever, just to indicate increases, decreases, or specific scenarios that you want to pay attention to. That's it. You don't want to make too many colors available for the user because that's just going to get distracting at some point.
Yeah. And the more you learn, the more you tend to go back to the white canvas background and a good color palette. You forget about the dark theme, the purple colors. You try to or tend to go to the white canvas and a nice color palette for the charts. And that's it. Because at the end of the day, that's going to take you further. That's so beautiful report. Sometimes we see, and I am guilty of creating what I call Picasso, that they are very beautiful, but they are not good for anything. Because nobody's going to send that to the CEO of the company, yes? But when you create a white canvas background report that gives you the proper analysis and the color palette is the correct one, and you have all the information at a glance, okay, you have a winner in your hand. I'm sure people will praise you more that you create a Picasso, as I call it.
Yeah. It's similar to, let's say, if I go the same approach. Let's say I go for the category and I go for something like profit. Okay, there's little to no categories. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. Region. We had, I think, 4 at least. So I copy the same information, but I go, for example, with the option of just choosing a different color for each and every one of them. Sure, this one visually probably looks a little bit more appealing because it catches your eye in that sense. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better than the previous one. Because as soon as you introduce more colors, what that also restricts you from doing is introducing more colors in different places. So for example, if I create a chart now here and go for something like, I don't know, let's say subcategory we had it here, and go for profit. You can see that the colors are starting to repeat themselves because you only have 8 base colors. The rest of them are just variations of it.
And you are tied. Now every time you want to show West has to be orange. You cannot show West in a different way now because it's tied to orange. And people try to understand that orange is West. So somehow you hand tie to the report color palette because of that. If you look at my report or some of the other report, you see it's a monochromatic palette. It goes from a dark blue to a light blue. Okay, and I can play. Yes, you can see I can play with that. I got the strong colors, and there is a very okay. The two colors, the red and the green, the accent color for arrows or negative, and everything is a monochromatic color palette. And I allow giving me more freedom actually to play around.
Exactly. It's the same as, for example, in the donut chart. I think I showed this the last time as well. When you, for example, reference the same one, let's say in this one I'm using the sum of profit. So profit, if I go for a singular color and I disable this approach, so let's say I change it to be something a little bit more interesting. Let's say purple, just as an example, right? So instead of having all these colors here, like I said, sure, it might be a little bit more visually appealing because it has a lot of different colors and so forth. But for the visual to make sense and for users to have better association, I can just say that this one's going to be different shades of purple. But now it's easier to connect them.
That is 100 times better and more beautiful than before. As simple as that. That's just shade of purple.
Exactly. You don't have to build like a rocket ship, right? You just have to make things that are working and provide you with the necessary insights. That is the most important thing. As far as the challenge goes, don't forget that you have the submission time until the 3rd of November, if I'm correct, right, Federico?
Yes, the 4th of November, still 10 days kind of away. I know we are asking you just to produce a report with ZoomCharts, but it's a game for you, believe me. You try and you bring something to the table. It's something that you have learned, something that you are gaining on, a new chart that you can tell people, I know how to work with ZoomCharts. Okay, so in this occasion, it's about how versatile you as a developer are and how easy you can handle different charts if you have to. So it's a great opportunity to actually bring something different. And believe me, I had the same troubles and problems with features that you might have. It doesn't matter if I have a few more years of Power BI because it's also the first time I'm been playing with ZoomCharts. And from that point of view, we are starting from zero. The only thing is that I stay playing there for 2 or 3 hours every day until I get to the solution. And I'm not going to lie, if I got a problem, I go to Avis. And Avis is giving you the same opportunity. I was asking today, Avis, I had this problem. And he replied to me, okay, thank you. You had the same opportunity. So if you are playing and you find a difficulty, please send it to them. Okay? Don't step back because it's a different challenge or different chart. To the contrary, actually, if we are less, we can charge the prices better.
Exactly. But yeah, also guys, one thing I want to ask you as a favor is don't forget to fill in the feedback forms. I know this is usually what you get, right? But trust me, it's not that the way we want you just to leave your information so we can reach you or things like that. No, the feedback forms are mainly for me and the organizers to understand if these sessions are useful. What else do you want to see? What kind of topics you want us to discuss? You know, if you want to see Federico more often and me more often, you know, if you just want to see Federico, I'm not offended by it. That's fine. But tell us what you're looking for.
Okay, well, 1 second. Avis and I are a couple. I mean, not a couple. We are kind of
better make it clear.
So I'm afraid if I'm coming, Avis coming. If Avis coming, I might not come because I don't work for Susha, but no, we are together. We're kind of a presenting couple.
Exactly. It just helps us to understand what to talk about.
Yeah, that's what we want. Guy, if we can pass you any information, not about the challenge, not about, but we can bring a webinar about how do we get into prepare a report, how do we deal with the client, how do we do all that, and we can bring that to your attention. Please let us know. Let us know.
Other than that, I think we talked about what we wanted to mostly today. If anything else, thank you, Inza. It's an unorthodox couple, but hey, we work out. It's the power of the baldies, trust me.
Yeah, so go to the barber and
exactly. It's gonna help you with the Power BI
because
skills.
it gives you power. I think whoever is listening to this two are crazy now. No, we are very happy to be sharing this moment with you. We are very happy sharing this moment with you. Hey, if you go to a webinar and you find the webinar boring, it's not good at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for the time. Let us know if you want to hear anything else from us or different topics or anything like that. Other than that, I wish you a happy day. And I'm looking forward to seeing your submissions and just seeing amazing things that you build. That is the most important thing.
Correct. Thank you, guys. See you around.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.